We're still having trouble, or we are live? Oh, there we go. We are live now. Welcome back to House Transportation. Good afternoon. It's Thursday, January 30th, 2025, and we have a returning witness. Evan Robinson is here to talk about the budget for the aviation program in the agency, and I will happily turn it over to you, and you can take us forward.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having our group here again. My name is Evan Robinson with the Vermont Agency of Transportation. I'm the Aviation Program Manager, and I am here to talk about this year's proposed, fiscal year 26 proposed budget. Along with me, I have John Nummy from the Agency of Transportation. John has been instrumental for our group in developing this budget and also is the leader of our project delivery team. So John and I will both communicate back and forth to this group regarding the proposed budget. Thanks for having. Let me share my screen here so you all can follow along. All right. Okay. Welcome. So I first wanted to give you all a little bit of introduction. Now that I know everybody's keen on aviation media, this is a photo, what you're looking at, the Northeast Kingdom International Airport in Coventry, Vermont. It's just a great photo. This was a day where we had several large jets visiting the area. And it was just really representative of a beautiful day on the airport and us hosting a group of pilots. So a little bit of background. Sorry, I didn't want to leave that slide, but yeah, a little bit of background for how we create the budget. We, in combination or with the Federal Aviation Administration, the aviation team develops what's called a capital improvement plan. And that is in with consultation of the FAA. A large amount of our funding comes from them. So we essentially develop a revolving 5-year horizon. So we're always looking out 5 years to identify the needs of the airport system. Now, on a yearly basis, we meet with them to check in on that 5-year plan. And that's when we really have an opportunity to narrow in on the current year. And those changes identified on the capital improvement plan, we're getting the information on how we prioritize projects from airport master plans. Now that's separate. So each airport we have has what's called a master plan. And roughly every 10 years, we update that master plan, which looks at all sorts of items such as potential growth, infrastructure needs. Consultants help us outline rough estimates for these capital improvement projects. And that's how we're able, in concert with the FAA, to sort of develop that 5-year horizon. In addition to the relationship with the FAA and the Agency of Transportation, as projects move forward, we're also taking consideration into what our personnel is seeing on the field for safety items, and also what the users are saying. So taking input from airport users, feedback from the community also helps inform what projects we're working on our airports. So this is a repeat slide from last week, but I thought it was a good spot to jump off here. Again, we received Federal Aviation Administration funding for 9 of our NIPIAS airports. Now, NIPIAS is the National Plan for Integrated Airport Systems. Long way to say all the airports that the FAA funds. Now, yearly, we get a state apportionment, and I will break down into all these moving forward. Non-primary entitlements. And we've been receiving funds from the bipartisan infrastructure law and airport improvement grants. Now, it's important to note that the bipartisan infrastructure law monies are ending in 26. Yep. The state T fund allocation, of course, that's what we're here primarily to talk about. And along with that, in addition, we do have airport generated revenues to support the aviation program. Now, narrowing in on numbers, this is, John, correct me, the state apportionment, this number is, in general, we receive around 520,000.
Right, yeah, that's what we get your state apportionment.
Okay, thank you. And we don't know that number for this next year yet. That's why I made to make sure that comment. That's a rotating number for the FAA. 1,300,000 in non-primary entitlement. And we do know for that upcoming, we'll have this 1,465,000 from the FAA through the bipartisan infrastructure law. Does everybody have, and if not, it's okay. We are referring to the cover sheet here in the white book for the aviation as we go through. Folks can follow along, write down the project list. That's what our presentation is, all the project numbers and figures we're getting from. All the numbers will be available right on the screen. Airport statistics. We have 10 state airports, as we talked about, lots of mowing to do, lots of pavement to maintain, as well as many easements, which we'll talk about more, and lots of fence. It's just some example of the amount of things we have on our airport to maintain. So I wanted to mention one more thing. Sorry, I'm recalling. In our budget overview, when we're creating it, the safety and compliance are the #1 priorities, and they go hand in hand. So all of the decisions made and put into this budget revolve around that. So for Bennington, the first project we are proposing for this year is we're pursuing abrogation easements, and we are wrapping up an obstruction study to identify potential hazards to our approach surfaces. Now, approaches are the areas in which pilots would navigate in and out of our airports. So we're in the midst of the environmental assessment to determine the impacts for addressing those obstructions. The environmental assessment will be wrapping up in early fiscal year 26, and then we can move forward with pursuing the abrogation easements. Now, abrogation easements are essentially airspace rights surrounding the airfield. Could be above certain levels, which we've identified that we need to address potential obstructions, most commonly trees that are growing up into our areas. So following the environmental assessment, the next step would be to purchase those abrogation easements. And that gives us rights in perpetuity to maintain them. So it could be negotiations with landowners, et cetera, to purchase.
How does that coincide to the work that's already been done there? There's been quite a few trees that were cut down over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
That took care of it, but apparently not.
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. So essentially, the standards from the Federal Aviation Administration changed during that project timeline. So we've now been notified that we have to go back and maintain those easements to a different standard than when this project originally went through. So you're exactly right. We have spent a lot of effort and money there, and we're chasing down the remainder of those extra obstructions that have been identified. Yeah. So in continuation, for Bennington, we have plans for an apron reconstruction, which, as you see in this photo, it's that large square area of pavement in front of the terminal building. We've received the grant in fiscal year 25 and been awarded the contract And we'll start construction this season and wrap up in early fiscal year 26. So that is planned for right off here coming up soon. And the monies here are for the construction of that apron, the reconstruction of that apron. And what goes into that, we will remove the existing pavement, replace 12 inches of sub-base material, work on the under drains, redo the tie downs, repaving, remarking. It's essentially a partial depth full reconstruction of that area. And you can see in the picture as well that it's much needed down there. The pavement is in fairly rough shape.
Oh, yeah, that's most of that was probably 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Yeah,
They're gonna be quite pleased.
yeah, absolutely. We have some happy
Yeah.
folks down south for sure.
The tie downs there, are those, not to, I know you want to work on the budget there, you pour concrete down underneath the pavement and then,
Yeah, John, can you explain how the tie downs are?
They pour it up to the surface, and then the anchor extends all the way down to the ground. There's different details of how you can do it.
well,
Hey, John, sorry, I forgot to mention, can you introduce first and last name, if I refer to you, just for folks listening?
oh,
for the
I
record?
didn't do that.
Yeah,
Yep.
so John Amaze, yeah.
Usually John, I'm Agency of Transportation, Aviation. Go ahead, finish your conversation there, Representative Casey, or you want to give us the rest of it?
That was it. I just- was it this
Did you get your answer?
Yeah, I just,
I'm just saying,
wondering what they did, if they went for a concrete base and stab rebar in there, or got some tie downs or something.
Yeah, so there's a physical hook that's attached into the ground, so when airplanes tie down, they're able to secure to an anchor that's established underneath that pavement.
So they don't go blowing across.
Yes,
so,
correct. Yeah. Right. And up this year, we also have, I mentioned those master plans that we conduct on a rotating around every 10 years. Bennington is up in line for that master plan. So the money here is to support that 10-year projection for Bennington Airport. And we'll be able to use that information from that to direct our improvements. On my notes here. All right, so EF-NAP in Berlin. Not a lot on the proposed budget for Berlin this year. What we do have here is we are conducting an obstruction study and an associated environmental assessment. We have done an obstruction study and environmental assessment, and now we're currently pursuing the purchase of those avigation easements in this upcoming fiscal year to clear obstructions that were identified. And the purchase of those, again, is for fiscal year 26. In Rutland, Southern Vermont Regional, and North Clarendon, we have a system down there. It's called an engineered materials arresting system. It's essentially a runaway airplane ramp. We have some limitations on the south end of that runway where there's a very large retaining wall. We don't have a really long distance for airplanes to overrun in an emergency. So this is mandated by the FAA for us to have this in that area. We have this large system with these blocks that require lots and lots of maintenance. Last year, we identified that there were some blocks that needed attention. And again, this is an FAA requirement to maintain this and to have it here. So we've put the money, EMAS maintenance from the T fund to support that.
Sorry, Representative Loud.
Can I just ask, does those materials sort of help slow the plane down? Is that the idea?
Yes.
Like that adds some friction to.
Yes, exactly. So the weight of the aircraft essentially like goes down into each one of these blocks And that's exactly what it's designed for, is to slow the aircraft like pretty abruptly.
Okay.
So it kind of really reduces that overrun. Runaway truck ramp,
Yes, exactly.
It's the same
I
principle, yeah.
was wondering about that. And what is that, the thing at the very end? Is that like a solid structure it looks like a sort of like a,
Oh, yeah, so that is that's a structure, of course, you can see where the retaining wall sort of falls off, but that's where we have runway end identifier lights are on. Is that what you're referring to with those orange pylons?
well, in the lower image.
Yeah.
That, at the end of where that paving is. I was just wondering.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so facing the other direction would be where the runway end identifier lights are.
I
So
see.
airplane landing to the north would be flying over this.
Got it.
They can't touch down till after it, but that's where the lighting systems
Okay,
are
that's like part of guidance then.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes,
Thanks
exactly.
very much. Yeah.
We're wrapping up the design for future apron construction at Rutland, which is slated for fiscal year 27. Those are the funds referred to next in the Clarendon list. The PVASI, the PAPI upgrade. PVASI stands for Pulsating Visual Approach Slope Indicator. It's an old style of guidance for pilots to come in, and it's currently decommissioned. So right now at Rutland, pilots landing to the north don't have vertical guidance by using instruments. So what they have to do currently is when they're coming in, they get below the clouds, they actually have to circle to land as part of their instrument procedure. So by adding this capability of a PAPI, which is a precision approach path indicator, it's kind of the updated modern version of this. It will really support the pilots with a safer approach into Rutland. And again, these are federally funded with their guidance and their monies. We're matching those projects. We have the obstruction study down at Rutland. The FAA again has alerted us we have some obstructions on our medium intensity approach lighting system and runway alignment indicator lighting system. That's commonly known as the MALSAR. It's a series of light posts that extend far away. If you think of Berlin and the Shaw's parking lot, you can see the lights with the. So we have an approach path to the north of the Rutland Airport, where we have some obstructions there. So we're working on an obstruction study to again mitigate those in the future. And $130,000 from the T fund is obligated to the TSA. Now, the Terminal Security Agency uses that money to support their operational costs at the Rutland Airport in support of Cape Air, which is the essential air service that runs flights 365 days a year here or there. Moving on. Oh, sorry.
So is that something, an annual payment we would need to make?
Yeah, so typically that has been federally matched to some extent. And we currently lost that federal match. So we're trying to understand how we can sustain this into the future. I think we'll have more conversations on this to come. There is some talks on how we can sort of make up for that federal match that's always been there for that. I'd be happy to follow up with any more details on that as we get them or dig a little deeper. But that's sort of the breadth of my knowledge with that.
Representative,
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. That would be great to get that information.
Yeah.
And do we know why the Federal Aviation Agency dropped this?
Yeah, I don't personally. I will follow up, John Nummy from AOT. Do you have any awareness of that?
I don't know, it's just that we've been given notice that they're no longer participating in that match.
Okay. Yeah, we have some follow up to do with that.
Okay.
Yeah. Other questions on Rutland? No. Thank you. Moving to the Northeast Kingdom International in Coventry, Vermont. big project that is going on this summer is the construction of a new terminal building to replace the old terminal building in Coventry. We have federal funding, and that is from a Northern Borders grant to support us with this project. The Northern Borders grant doesn't cover the entire project cost. So we needed additional T fund allocation to complete it. Again, now this contract is fully executed. The construction is starting as soon as we get a thaw in the spring, and it's slated for completion in September. Easement maintenance. This is a really important one to talk to folks about. I mentioned earlier in Bennington and, in Berlin and Rutland, we have these obstructions and we pursue easements to purchase. These are rights, airspace rights we own in perpetuity. Now, it's our obligation to maintain those so that they don't get out of hand again. I mean, trees grow every year despite, how much on our airports, that's a thorn in our saddle. We have this constant obligation. So you sort of start spending money with support from the FAA to purchase the easements, but then the responsibility of maintaining them falls on us and our operational costs to maintain those. What we've been doing is developing a plan for every airport to maintain our easements, ideally to do selective cutting. Certain easements and airports have specific management plans to mitigate the growth of those easements. And we manage for desirable species and long-term maintenance. So this will be a trend. As we get these navigation easements, we still have to maintain them. So it's our idea to get these on a rotating schedule of a couple a year using some allocation to T fund to address those management plans. Highgate, Franklin County Airport. Sorry. So we have a environmental assessment this year to look at perimeter fencing for remaining portions of the airport. Now, perimeter fencing improves security and reduces the wildlife impacts on the airport, and it makes a safer airport for pilots. So we have the environmental assessment, which will identify the environmental impacts and satisfy NEPA requirements before this project. Taxiway Alpha extension. We're doing the preliminary engineering to complete the design and permitting for a complete parallel taxiway. In the photo, you can see not where the runway is, but a parallel to it. We have about 2/3 of our runway covered with this parallel taxiway. Pilots can navigate off the runway to get from one end to the other, which is a huge safety factor. We have plans to extend that all the way to the north. So pilots landing in either direction can immediately exit and travel off the runway. Currently, if one lands heading north, they have to what's called back taxi on the airport, which is a safety hazard for other airports using. Go ahead.
So you mean the right hand one would
Yes.
extend all the way up to where the other one is?
Correct, and it would enter right, there's a little like protrusion on the end of the runway there at the top of the photo that you can see.
Yeah.
That's where the parallel taxiway would meet the
Okay.
current runway.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Evan, if you happen to have it in those videos, you're going to bring us back.
Yeah,
If you have all of that area on Highgate Airport and perhaps the highly discussed property slightly to the right and whatnot, and
east or to the west,
I guess that would be east.
sure. Yeah.
And then I understand there's some taxi area around back where there's some hangars and stuff on that.
Yes.
Backside.
Yes.
I would love to see.
Sure. Yeah, I
I would
would.
get around to this section that would be over here by the refrigerator.
Yes.
And down.
Yeah, I have actually fairly extensive drone or UAS footage of this as the construction projects over the last couple of years. What I can do is put together clips and make them accessible to all of you. Happy to share
Is
that.
this for personal use?
I would suggest it's legislative use. The Franklin County Field Days property is
Right, but
right here around,
the county.
right attached to this airport property, and there's also a state garage there, right, Michelle? There's a state garage there, so it fits right into our area, and perhaps that would show.
Did they run the sewer up there already?
Yes.
So that would bring you all the way down to the end of the runway and to the landing on the more southern, so the east and the south.
Yeah.
There's enough going on there to hijack the committee for a few minutes, but we'll move on.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll add that to the follow-up list with the videos for sure.
It's on Swan.
Did you have a set? Oh, no, sorry.
No, that was
I
it.
addressed your question. Yep, sorry about that.
If you really want to get Representative McCoy going today, if you could bring that UAV just a quarter mile across the road to where the LVRT is, that would be, so how easy it would be to access the trail from there. Anyway, might as well hit all the buttons this
He
afternoon.
digressed.
All right, the moving down the line, Highgate, the T-fund allocation for grassland management at Highgate. We've identified this as a need to support current ANR permit conditions on the airfield. As part of the permit conditions at Franklin County, we're committing that funding for compliance with those permits on a yearly basis. And continuing, another easement maintenance. I won't go in. We spoke about that on the previous slide in Coventry. Same idea in Newport, where we have to maintain those navigation easements. And Franklin has been identified as one where we can put that this year. Another perimeter fence line item here. This is for the actual design and engineering of that perimeter fence following the environmental assessment. Okay, moving to Middlebury State Airport in Middlebury. If you recall from our last presentation, the importance of the fuel facility at our airports, bringing folks in, driving economic development and growth, and really having the service available for our pilots. So we're actively working on these funds for the Middlebury Fuel Farm. Half of these funds, what you see here, this 385,720, this is for the construction costs of this project. Site work and the ordering of the tank in fiscal year 26. And then the second half of that would be in fiscal year 27 for the completion of that system. Oh, sorry. Introduce yourself and clarify
Yeah,
that.
Agency of Transportation, John Nunney. We have funding right now to buy the first half of the tank, and then it would be finished in FY 26. So this is actually showing the second half of that project.
That's right.
Yes.
Thanks.
Is the tank in the blue set? Where is the tank here? Where's
The
the
tank is
tank?
actually, I think, to the left, just
Oh.
beyond the photo. This is mainly showing the
okay.
terminal building. So,
Yeah, sorry. It's to the north of what this image shows.
Okay.
Be happy to show you an expanded
Okay.
version of this. We can send that as a follow-up
Okay.
to identify where it is.
All right, thank you.
Yep,
How big's the tank? There's a couple tanks.
12.
Just one type of fuel, or is it new? So like a split deal, or it has
no, it'd just be add gas.
just gas?
Yeah, this one will just be add gas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Next is we're wrapping up an environmental assessment and working on getting a design for a new terminal building at the Middlebury Airport. We're in this design, getting it ready is in part of, we're getting ready to apply for an ATP grant, which is an airport terminal grant. That's a really competitive grant that requires the design to be in place, essentially shovel ready. So we're putting the effort in here to make the design and in hopes of receiving that federal grant for that.
Is it ever more maintenance related because of the condition of the building, or is there some opportunities and some things happening down there that are helping drive the need to expand?
Yeah, again, this has been identified as a positive addition to the airport from that airport master plan. And in that, alongside, yes, would increase to the potential economic growth and development and support the businesses there. Currently, visitors to the airport use like the inside of the maintenance facility as kind of a welcome. It's kind of a, we're really trying to make one building right now. In the current situation, there's not a clearly defined area for like pilots to hang out or a conference room or facilities. It's really just kind of plopped in with one of the businesses there. So in an effort to promote the growth at the airport, it will contribute positively to that. Environmental assessment. Yeah, sorry, John, would you clarify the environmental assessment, please, that line item?
Yeah, that's the environmental assessment for the terminal building itself.
Okay,
So we'll be wrapping up that in the second half of that environmental assessment. Right now, we're in the middle of it. And, we'll be wrapping it up early of fiscal year 26.
thank you. Identified for Middlebury, we also have FAA funded snow removal equipment. And they're based on the needs of the airport, the amount of pavement. We are eligible to based on those specifications, we're eligible to use the FAA funds to replace our aging equipment at our airports. So we've identified this money to do the research. This includes all the consultant fees, determining eligibility, and actually acquiring that piece of equipment that's going to work best at our airport. And we can expect one each year to help replace and augment our capabilities on the airports. And Middlebury is this year's.
Just make sure you get the right size, you don't want.
Yeah, I know.
Down the road.
Yeah.
For a building that.
That's pretty impressive.
All right, moving onward to Morrisville Stowe State Airport in Morristown. We are showing here construction funds for half of the taxiway, parallel taxiway phase 3 expansion. So this is something that will be going out to bid this coming April. So for the first half being a spring 26 construction project. And as you can see in the photo, that's the apron, the light gray portion of the apron to the south, where we've identified an area to increase that pavement and tie down capacity, as well as adding part of that parallel taxiway that also goes to the south with an additional entrance to the runway. We have the next one in Morristown is the property acquisition. Now that's last fall, we were able to purchase a property that abuts the airport property. It's a house, and that is one of the properties where we've identified as possible airport expansion in the future. So we now own that property in that house. The money here is for demolition and regrading of that property to support future development at the airport.
Evan, is your position involved in managing and dealing with the FBO there at all?
Yes,
Is that
yes.
situation solid and rectified, I guess, is a big issue?
Yeah, no. So great question. We currently do not have an FBO there. The question directly relating to my involvement is I will be very involved with ideally getting an FBO there as soon as possible. In my short time here, I've not worked on that project specifically, But based on feedback from users, I know our staff will look to address that.
Can you
Yes.
tell us what I know what it is, but.
Yes.
the
Yes.
acronym.
Yeah, so an FBO is a fixed-based operator. It's essentially a business that's located on the airport that can offer airport users and tenants services such as but not limited to aircraft maintenance, fuel sales, facilitating tie down or storage of your aircraft. They facilitate rental cars. They could facilitate other hospitality type items. Some offer flight instruction. There isn't a one size fits all, but it's the beating heart of the airport and really making those services available to all of our airport users. So with that being said, as you probably all can extrapolate, it's important to have FBOs on our airports. And that's a particularly busy airport. We have a lot of people visiting for the tourism and recreation in the area. So having an FBO there would significantly increase everybody's happiness there, I should say. Moving down the list, we have sorry, I may have missed. Yep, sorry, I missed one on the slide and I apologize for that. I have it in my notes. The next one on the slide is the South Burlington. That's the BTV Airport state match. And again, I apologize for not having that in the slides here. So the BTV match is it's $500,000, which is a yearly allocation from a T-bill to support Burlington Airport with their state match for their FAA funded projects. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe BTV comes in and talks to you all about their use of those funds.
Yeah, thanks.
What's that?
Yeah, they have.
Okay, thank you. Yep. All right, we have Springfield Hartness. Now, we have preliminary engineering plans and appraisals and right-of-way costs related to the easements are included for these navigation easements we're pursuing there. We know that there are obstructions and they need to be addressed before we have the major reconstruction project of runway 523, which you can see as the long runway in this photo. So the reconstruction, the PE costs are associated with the final phase of the preliminary engineering and permitting of that project. And then the last line here is the PE professional engineering funds for the final design of, sorry, the PE funds are for the final design after the permitting is complete. And we will be getting ready to advertise for a low bid to use in a construction grant application for the FAA with that design. So statewide, we have 3 line items here that I want to speak on. First being our airport operations T-fund allocation of $1.5 million. To reiterate, the budget here is created with safety and compliance in mind, and we have so many operational costs that are directly related to those, such as significant maintenance of infrastructure, equipment used on the airports, and the maintenance of all of our statewide assets, whether it be the fuel facilities, fences, gates, tools, trucks, sanders, plows, snow removal equipment. We have costs associated with snow removal products, sodium formate. We're not able to use regular road salt on our airports. We have to use special FAA approved sand on our airports with a specific requirement of aggregate type. And the costs associated with all of those needs are, as you can assume, rather substantial. As well as in this operations budget, this is how we fund regular in-house vegetation management of all the airfields. We have a really capable team that knows how to do a lot with a little. So we're really fortunate to have that team. Now, we also fund the operation, the equipment and software associated with our drone program out of this budget as well. So being able to provide that service to not only the agency, but any other state agency who has utilized our services, we're reaching into this operational budget to support that as well.
Jane Thomason, I'm sorry.
Just to clarify, for any of this operational budget, is this just for the state and municipal airports, or does this cover any of the private airport support?
Yeah, no, this is for the 10 state-owned airports. Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. We in our group for the operations budget, we have to make decisions on a daily basis, prioritizing the current needs and future needs. And with costs arising, we are gracious to have the opportunity to have this transportation fund allocation. Another mention, one relationship we've developed, which has helped our operational budget. We've developed great relationships with the AOT district forces, and we're able to utilize their services at a reduced rate, which has worked out really well for some of that vegetation management, special projects, utilizing their equipment. So we found a really great relationship, and we'll continue to work with our agency friends to support that. Any questions on the operational costs?
Oh, I'm sorry, there's Representative White's got a question on the online.
Yes, thank you for this information. I have two questions. The first is, I'd be interested in seeing, understanding the utilization of the different airports, like average daily usage, and I don't know if that's broken down by business usage versus recreational usage. Is that information that you could share with the committee?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to clarify, I just want to make sure you're sort of looking at like the different numbers of airplanes visiting. Is that what you mean by usage? Like different
Yes.
numbers and types? Yeah.
Yeah, airplanes coming and going at the different airports. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And as a follow-up to, I'm sorry, I don't remember, one of the representatives last week asked about the usage at Island Pond. And I had mentioned that it was hard to understand the enplanements at Island Pond. And in the follow-up document that I actually wrote this morning, and sorry it hasn't made it to your desk, I did address that not only is it hard to determine our number of enplanements at Island Pond, statewide, we don't have a real good measure on seeing how many planes. But I will say we are actively working at looking at solutions right now to help us better understand that. Now, we've been able to piecemeal some sense of our enplanements based on different documentation, whether it's flight plans that were filed to a certain area. But there's a technology called ADS-B, and that's a piece of equipment that emits location information. It's broadcasted nationwide at all times. That's how, if y'all are familiar with like FlightAware or flight tracking apps, you can go on and see really any flight in the world at any time. Those airplanes are using ADS-B technology to report that information. Now, there's specialized software out there that is utilizing that open information and helping consolidate that into a usable product for airport sponsors to understand how many people are physically landing on their airports. So I will address your question and say we are actively working on that because the number of enplanements, the more visitors you get, it actually can qualify you for more federal funding. So with a good pulse on that information, it's beneficial to us as an agency as well. So long story short, we are really interested in getting that technology and getting a better understanding of that.
Okay, so I have one kind of follow-up on that, and then I'll lead into my next question. So is it true that the Burlington International Airport is the only airport that is using air traffic control? And so we probably would have specific data from Burlington, but not from the other airports because they're not using air traffic control. Am I correct in that? No.
You're correct that in Vermont, that is the only facility with an air traffic control on site and a tower.
Okay.
I would have to follow up with Burlington. I would make a general assumption that their data on their visitors, they do have a higher level, a finer resolution on that, and they have data to support it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then leading to my next question, which maybe you don't have the answer if we don't actually understand utilization, but when an airplane is using one of our state-run airports, are we not charging them to use the facility? Is there any revenue coming in through airports using these facilities?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So for transient visitors who are visiting for a period of time, at our airports that have a FBO, a fixed-based operator, the fixed-based operator would, as part of their lease agreement, would be the people collecting the monies on those tie-down fees or those hangar fees. But on a daily basis, as far as our airports that are just attended by an airport maintenance worker, the answer would be no.
Thank you.
Yep.
Representative Tomlins?
I think I'll pass.
Anybody else? Please.
Okay. So moving down the line, we have our aviation facilities budget line item, $825,000 from the T fund. As you all are aware from the presentation last week and through today, we have an immense amount of facilities. We have state hangars, we have snow removal equipment buildings, we have terminal buildings. And all of those require continual both preventative maintenance and reactive maintenance to ongoing issues, whether it's many heating systems, really anything associated with those facilities. So the budget there is to maintain our facilities. We have at last count currently like between 75 and 100 outstanding sort of areas in which we've identified we could make improvements on our facilities. So much of this funding here is working on getting those improvements made, as well as keeping the lights on, keeping fuel in the tank to keep them heated. So the costs associated with those facilities is what this line item is for. Questions on facilities?
Thank you. So at all the airports, there isn't somebody there working every day, right, from the state, or is there? And how do they keep up with the plowing and whatnot? I mean, it's contracted out.
Yeah, no. So at 9 of our airports, aside from Island Pond, we do have full-time employees who are responsible for the regular maintenance of those facilities. Now, some of those tasks lie in-house with us and our personnel, like you suggested, snow removal, grass mowing, and sort of what I would call like normal facility maintenance.
Opening and closing the door, opening them up. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And we have, again, a really dedicated crew that has a huge skill set. So when we can when we can make these repairs in-house, we utilize our team. we also have a network, like we have employees in one airport that might have a specialty with certain type of equipment or something on a facility. So when we'll bring folks around to work as a team to get all these repairs or normal maintenance operations done. Now, 5 days a week on average. The wintertime, our folks are there very often. If we have snow removal on the weekends, we have V-Trans has folks on the field nearly 7 days a week in the winter if the weather dictates that. So that's where a lot of these requests are coming from facilities. We also have businesses who could be renting state buildings, or they're just on the airport. I spoke of those FBOs. Those are our eyes and ears on the airfield when we're not there. So a lot of our facilities work requests come from the businesses or tenants or users, and they have contact information to get those messages to our folks. And then I should mention, we work extensively with the AOT facilities group. They have great relationships with the contractors and many contracts in place, so they help us facilitate the stuff we can't do in-house. And last in the statewide, we have, sorry, not last on this slide, the administrative costs. Now the T-Fund, the $3,287 for the payroll of those dedicated employees. And costs associated with that payroll, insurance, benefits, et cetera. Oh, there's the South Burlington match on the slide. Sorry, folks, for going out of order. So just to reiterate there, the $500,000 we talked about earlier for the BTV match. Down the line here, Civil Air Patrol. This is $60,000 we allocate to the Civil Air Patrol. Civil Air Patrol is a Air Force auxiliary group that has a presence on our airports. There you can see the airplane, the red, white, and blue one there. They're an education entity. They get youth involved with kind of like a junior ROTC type thing, but for the Air Force. So they support youth aviation education. They also conduct search and rescue flights around the state, or also are used for emergency documentation, like during the flooding they flew. In addition to the $60,000, and that, sorry, I should say that's the monies that we give them is to support the training and the real world emergency exercises that they conduct. We also offer them based on availability and each situation on each airport. They have, we offer them lease space free and work with them to make sure they have a presence on our airport. So in addition to the funds, we host them or give them leases free of charge. And last line item we have here is the pavement maintenance, and a good portion of the state apportionment from the FAA every year, that 500 some odd thousand, if you recall from earlier in the presentation, goes towards a statewide pavement maintenance construction money. Now, every year we have to conduct all sorts of pavement repairs. Everybody here knows that winters are real tough on pavement in Vermont. So we conduct on a yearly basis crack sealing, remarking, could be some block patching if we have significant damage on our airports. Now, as part of the Part 139 certification to have Cape Air at Rutland, Vermont, we have to do Rutland on a yearly basis. And in addition, after Rutland has been done, we utilize this money at typically 2 to 3 other airports per year. So we get all of our other airports on a rotating cycle. And then the second line item related to the pavement maintenance, the PE funds there. Every year, as soon as the construction season's done, we're planning for the following year. So we have one chunk of money that we use for the actual work in the summer and into the fall. And then over the winter, around this time of year, we're making the plan for the following year. And that's actually, we've made it through the list. I don't have my watch on. We're
Perfect.
on time.
So,
All right. Any questions before I unplug and?
I think we're good, other than, the next time we see you, you have to have your
Yes.
all your video, cool stuff.
Yes, I will be sure to follow up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. I guess we're moving on from air to rail. I believe Dan, you are back. Good afternoon. We'll move you on up here in a slow transition to the witness stand and slide.
Yeah, so you're.
First slide up there.
First slide, I haven't looked at it yet.
Oh, it is.
Oh, Bennington is. Oh, I'll tell you everything. Bennington gets everything. Yeah, I will certainly say that up in Franklin County, from the air perspective, we certainly got our share in the last few years.
5,000 feet turnout, right?
A lot of. Yeah.
So Tim must go back to bed.
Need some room. Oh, yeah. Say, I did it all.
He went back and asked him, his peanut.
I'm gonna guide you to the book. Over here, yeah, finally, almost 4 year cuts.
I was telling him if that turns out like a photo, that's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Battery die and.
My battery doesn't last for you. I know that you. I'm sure you have the license. When you were in the civil air patrol, of course you did. I know there's nothing that, you'll find there's nothing that Phil hasn't done. That's the point of his career. His life travels up and down the world, up and down the country. Involvement, volunteering. This is not Dan's first go.
No, it really isn't. Yeah,
Vermont Rail Systems in tomorrow.
yeah, they told me they were coming in tonight.
I love railroads.
That's great. All right, so
We're ready to
You
go
ready-
whenever.
ready set?
I think we are, right? We're ready to roll right into it, and you're gonna cap our afternoon.
Okay, so for the record, I'm Dan Delabriere. I'm the Rail Program Director at V-Trans. So I was gonna ask you, Mr. Chair, how you would like, what level of detail you would like, how we did it last year or how I normally.
Well, I tell everybody, if I'd have known I was gonna be sitting in this seat, I would have paid more attention last year. So, details are good. I also think that when the members, when they have questions, it helps
Sure.
dig into the parts that they're most interested in their piece. So I guess a little flexibility to kind of respond to the members as they come up, and
Okay,
we'll kind of go through it. And when we get closer to, 20 of or something, we'll make sure we've gotten all the way through. We're
okay.
getting closer to get before.
So, what I've got is just a really quick slideshow because a lot of new members here. And I'm gonna refer you guys to the white book next. I'm not gonna put my budget up on the screen. It's in the white book, so we're gonna go through that. But first, to give you a flavor of what I'm talking about, I thought I would show you some pictures. So can I share my screen? Am I able to do that? Am I allowed to do that? Okay, I'm good. So, ending my PowerPoint will be the next. Here it is. Yeah, except that's the last slide. Guess I had it on the last slide. What I thought I'd do is just give you guys, so in the rail section in FY25, so the budget money we're spending right now. The rail program probably had, if not its biggest, but if it didn't break the record, we had a pretty big year last year as far as projects, and that was, we got an FRA grant, build grant about 5 years ago for 29 bridges. And we had, I think, 18 bridges in construction last summer, right? So it was a big year. Yeah, so at one point we actually, and this is very unheard of, we actually closed down the section of railroad between Rutland and Hoosick, New York, which I'm showing here. These are all the 29 bridges as they show on the map. And we closed the railroad down for 21 days. And in the railroad industry, that just doesn't happen because there's no detour. You can't just like go to the next street and come around and bring your car to that same customer. So we had a lot of logistics. We moved a lot of freight. We did go around, but to go around, you literally have to go from here. We sent our freight. So from Hoosick, we sent it all the way down over into Mass and then up the New England Central into White River and then up to Burlington and then down from Burlington down to Rutland. So this freight was going all around the country, so it didn't have to come here. But I just want to give you some highlights of kind of, when we say we're doing a bridge project, this is kind of what we mean. So this was the bridge. This is one of the 29 bridges. So this is what it looked like before, and this is what it looked like after, right? So in basically 21 days, this is what we built. So imagine that. So we did a lot of the prep work, of course, ahead of time, but completely new structure here. Totally new. This is one of them. This is another one, not quite as intense, but we redid a lot of the abutment work and the bridge seats. This is just up from that last one. This one, we had to do some abutment work. And then the pier in the middle of the river, we had to shore up what's underneath the bottom of that pier. So you can kind of see where we dewatered it. We firmed up underneath the pier. We did the bridge abutments on each end. So this is kind of the work we were talking about. So when I talk about bridge projects, this is the kind of stuff I'm talking about. This was a project this was a very odd, weird culvert that existed for 100 years. It was about 4 foot by 6 foot tall. This is what we ended up with, and it doesn't do it justice on how tall this thing is, but that's about 70 or 80 feet up to the top of that thing. And this is standing on the top, kind of looking down. Another bridge in Dorset.
Question about
Yeah.
that, and I was meant to ask it earlier when your highway counterpart was here. So we build these culverts, the new box they call it or whatnot, the box.
Yeah.
And it's got to fill up with sediment and everything, like it fills up over time, doesn't it? As the water flows through, et cetera. Is there a maintenance to that?
Yes.
Like 10 years from now, it's going to be 3/4 full and we're not moving the water. How do you take care of that to keep it? I assume you're based on the capacity is why you built it the way you did. And then, the amount of water you expect, but it would fill up every year with more and more junk. So what happens in that respect? How do you keep that?
So what does happen, so part of the design, when you design a new structure these days, is you actually look at like hydraulics, meaning if debris gets in there, do you design it in a way that water is going to be able to move that debris all the way through? So there's part of the design that accounts for that. Now, does that always work? No, it doesn't work. Like you get a big flood event, you get debris in there. Sometimes you got to crawl in there and go get it. Or the smaller ones, you got to put a fire hose down there and flush it out. So, I mean, there is maintenance to culverts, no matter what the size is. So, but part of the new design, and when we talk about this stuff, is making the hydraulics work for you, right? Pushing that stuff. But yes, you're 100% correct. Debris gets in these culverts. So that was, am I going the right way? So in Dorset, this bridge, over the years, in this area, the whole floodplain has sort of filled in, like you say. So the water level really has gone up quite a bit. And so when you do get a rain event in this area, you can see this was when the water was very, very high, touches the bottom of the structure. So we replaced the structure and we picked it up out of the water. So this is a brand new structure, complete. And now any debris or anything. So this is a big floodplain. This is not like a big rushing river in this area. So water just kind of goes up and down. Just up the stream from that, and an almost identical sized bridge, but another one just like it. So there it is when we're all complete. Some of the structures we build actually aren't for rivers. So in this particular case, it's a cattle pass. So if there's a farmer on one side needs to move his or her animals from one side to the other, there's actually a cattle pass and they have rights and we have some structures like this. I thought you'd be interested. I thought that was kind of a cool thing because a lot of people don't know that. Another one, this is just sort of the before and after, you know, you can see the old crumbling bridge abutment and then you can see the new structure. So another one almost identical to it, just, we had a bunch of these. And then another concrete structure. So I didn't want to spend, I wanted to give you guys a flavor for when I go into the budget book next and I say there's a bridge project, you have an idea, a visual in your head to say, oh yeah, okay, that's what a rail bridge looks like, or that's, you know, that's kind of the stuff we work on. So anyway, these are just what we did last fall. These are just some of the projects that I just thought were interesting that I thought the committee might like to see, because again, rail program, we had an amazing year last year. We pulled off an amazing engineering feat last fall. So like we did 29 bridges in 4 years, start to finish, design, permit, construction, 4 years. About $53 million on 29 sites. And the majority of it was last summer. So anyway, it's kind of what we did. All right, that's all I wanted to share on the screen. We can now go to the white book and we can get into the actual dollars of what we're doing in FY26. So I want to refer you folks to, is it tab 11, I think? Tab 11. And what I think I'll do is I'm going to stop and talk about some of the highlighted projects that I think are things that we talk about, but I might just say it and move on because there's literally 3 pages of projects here. We are a very project-based budget, so a lot of FEMA projects, bridge projects, culvert projects, crossing projects. Yeah, so in this budget, there's 22 bridge projects in here, so I won't describe every bridge, is what I'm saying. I only have 50 more minutes, so, and I think you'll be bored anyway. So we'll start at the top, and then the very first one that everybody likes to talk about every year is Amtrak and the Amtrak subsidy. So just for everybody's familiar, just so you're familiar, we have 2 Amtrak trains that run in and out of the state every day. The Vermonter starts in St. Albans and runs all the way down to Washington, D.C. We have a north and a southbound every single day. We have the Ethan Allen, starts in Burlington, goes down to New York, Moynihan Station in the New York Penn area, and then both north and south. So we have to pay our share of the cost of that train, sort of minus the revenue that we get for the ticket revenue that Vermont generates for ticket revenue. So when you add all that up, next year we're forecasting about $9.5 million to pay for those 2 trains. 7 days a week, that's 4 trains a day, so 2 north, 2 south. So, and our ridership is growing. Burlington, for instance, I'll give you an example. When we started 2 years ago, first year ridership out of I'm just talking about Burlington Station, was around 15,000 riders per year. This last 12 months, we were 28,000 riders last 12 months. We've almost doubled our ridership at the Burlington Station alone. So the train's doing well.
What are the different line items again, as far as just a programming thing? You know, you have with the FY, it's on a different line item, FY26, it's a new line item for the subsidy.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, in the white book, it's just
Oh,
in
you're
the detail, okay, I was just wondering why it's separated out from last year to this year's budget. It's probably maybe just a program thing.
Yeah, so we have to, because we get some federal money, we use CMAQ, we use the mitigation fund, the Federal Highway Mitigation Fund money to use as part of our Amtrak subsidy.
Yeah.
They make us have an annual budget every year, so we can't, so anything we spend in 25, we stop at 25.
It's gotta be a separate output.
Our separate year, we start at federal fiscal, so next October, we'll have a new line item with a new bucket of money, a new federal bucket of money. We have to do it that way. Well, no, well, good catch, because we've only been doing it for 2 years.
That was sleeping last year.
Federal Federal Highway last year, was the first year we did it, was last year.
Okay.
So good catch, he's good.
That's why we keep them.
That's why.
He's good.
Yeah, on the 28,000, 15 to 28,000,
Yeah.
is there a target, a marketing number, a look that you think would be, really demonstrate the level of success that it really works? Like what's the marketing number? Where are you looking to get to? What are you,
Yeah, so we're exceeding it.
what is the number you think should be in the next few years? What should we be hearing looking forward, barring, obviously major, some outside influence? What are you looking to grow it?
So when we first started, we were targeting a 10% increase a year. Obviously, we're almost at 100. So we're exceeding our target. We don't, when we started forecasting all the passengers and looking at the actual data that supports how it grows, we were thrilled, but it doesn't, if you look at the data, we shouldn't have this many riders so far, but we're doing great and no complaints. So when you say, what should I forecast next? I guess we got to redo the data because we're missing something on our forecasting.
So, evidence wise, the college kids are embracing it or not to go back and forth to you? What do you have any idea what's driving? Or are you saying you're going to revisit it? I guess
Well, so
with that kind of success, I'm
we thought it was,
excited to hear about.
we thought it was going to be driven by college students, and we are getting the college students. We're getting more midweek passengers than we were forecasting. So people are riding it midweek a lot more than we thought. So, great problem to have. We're happy about it, but we weren't forecasting. So we need to look at where those passengers are coming from to see if that model can sustain itself, right? And we don't know that yet. So it's something that, again, it's only 2 years old, right? We're still learning. The other thing that's interesting is Essex Junction, which is the Vermonter route, right, is just 10 miles away. We had looked at it and we said, well, if you rode it in Essex, now you can get it in Burlington. Are those the same passengers? They're not. They're not the same passengers.
Going down.
Essex has maintained its ridership. So it's been great.
Representative Wells?
When you get in St. Albans to Washington, how long did it take to get Washington from St. Albans
Oh, gosh.
on a train?
Yeah, about,
12 hours.
I'm gonna say
12
12,
hours.
I'm gonna say 12, but I don't know the exact.
Average speed?
So the northern part, so we go, a lot of different speeds. So St. Albans to White River, we're going 59 miles an hour. White River down through Brattleboro and almost Springfield, we're doing 79. We get a little further, we go about a 110 when you get down on the northeast corridor. So it changes depending on the track, what kind of track it is. If it has PTC, which is positive train control, all the software I was talking about the last time I was in here. So it varies, but so anywhere from 59, 79, 110. Those are the speeds.
12 hours to get to us.
But it still stops.
Oh, yes.
You can get on in the morning and be in Washington, you can get on there.
That's right.
Yep.
Got
In the morning
Wi-Fi,
there and you get beer.
drink a beer,
It's origin, it stops at St. Albans.
Good thought,
walk around.
Representative Burt?
How is the Brattleboro numbers?
Brattleboro is, depending on the month, Brattleboro is either our second or third best station in the state. So
After Essex.
Brattleboro could be Essex, could be White River. Those
Stay
kind of
about the
flip flop,
same.
but they stay pretty steady. Yeah. Yep. Strong stations there. And as you know, you're getting a brand new
Oh
station.
my gosh, I'm grateful to Amtrak for that.
Yeah. So,
Representative Powell?
Yeah, I don't want to jump ahead. You might be talking about this later, but we're having new trains made and being built
there's
for
new equipment, yes. Yes.
The new rail cars.
Yes, yeah, new coaches
What's the
and
status on those, and will that show up? That won't show up in here.
it will eventually show up because it's going to cost us more money to have new trains, right? So new equipment, new money. But Vermont's predicted to be, I think we're still 2 years away. They won't come to Vermont first. They're going to go, they're going to the West Coast and then there's the Midwest. And then I think we're getting ours. They come in groups because like the Vermonter, for instance, we share our train. So that train might go from St. Albans down to White River, but the next day, that exact equipment might not come back to Vermont, right? Or, so it changes where it goes. We share equipment. So. All right. Won't get through this whole thing.
I'm excited about your good news.
Yeah. The next one is, that I want to talk about is, and I'm not going to talk about every line, but the next item I want to talk about is the Montreal Amtrak money. I have put a bit of a placeholder in here. This is not an exact dollar amount, but what I wanted to talk about here is what is the next step. We talked a little about Montreal last time I was in here, and there's a report coming out, feasibility study about the station. Well, there's that piece, which is the actual station, but then there's also a piece about from the station to Alberg, that section of track. And we need to do a little bit of study on that. And then we need to do the next level of the station study. So we have this, they're about to release a feasibility study that says our initial concept of the station, everything fits. And beyond that, it needs this much more engineering and this much more architectural work in this year. Then we need to take that information and actually do that engineering and do that architectural drawing so that we can put it out to bid and say, contractor, here's your bid documents and so that's sort of the next step. And Vermont will have a share in funding that study because it'll be basically the Vermonter and the Adirondack train from New York that share that platform and share that pre-clearance facility. So we have a piece in that. I have put a target number, what I think our share might be. I don't have a great idea whether that's the exact number, but it's a budgeted number that I think I'm in the ballpark. So it's the best number I have so far. So anyway, again, that study and that piece, that'll take some, it's not it's years, right? We're not 1 or 2 years away, which I wish we were, but again, there's a lot of people in this puzzle, between states, Amtrak, provincial governments, border protection folks from both sides of the border. So a lot of pieces in this puzzle. Anyway, I wanted to highlight that's what that means. When you're looking at that line item in there, it's the next piece that Vermont will need to fund. So that's our next piece that we're going to do. Next one I want to talk about is an error in the budget. That's totally my fault. I didn't take it out in time. That was supposed to be, this next line item was supposed to be replaced with a different project and it did not get entered correctly. So if you look at the Wacker subsidy in here, $260,000 is Wacker subsidy. That money was supposed to get changed over to a White River Junction station project. The roof is leaking and there is the cupola on top is failing. So there's a White River Junction project that was supposed to replace that because the Wacker subsidy, we in the last renewal of the lease, we negotiated out paying a Wacker subsidy on this line. So we don't have to pay that anymore.
Should be paying us. So if you got it out, I guess we'll do it.
Yeah, so we're not, so the good news is we're not paying the subsidy anymore. The bad news is I messed up in the budget. So, and just full
So how
disclosure.
does that work?
So we'll have to do a budget adjustment and switch projects out. So, but the money's correct. I messed up the line. But I wanted to bring that up. So, okay, the next project that I want to talk about in here, which I think is a good one for you guys to be aware of, is in Barton. There's a transload facility that's going to happen. Right now, there's a transload facility just south of Orleans where there's a bunch of barley that comes in on trains for all the microbrews and all of Vermont, New Hampshire, some of Maine, New York. So it comes into that facility. Well, that same owner of that property is now working with the railroad to create a facility for a siding that's going to accept propane cars. So there's gonna be an unloading facility for propane. So why is that great? It's great for people in Vermont because now the cost of propane, hopefully will stay competitive in that area because now the propane's coming to them as opposed to trucking it from further away. So yeah, so we're excited about that project. So that's the Barton Transload facility, and that's essentially helping fund another siding at that transload facility. And then the propane infrastructure, we're not paying for. The rail infrastructure for the siding, we're helping pay for. And that was through a Northern Borders grant that we got a couple of years ago. So little economic development going on there in Orleans, so.
It's back on the way. I can't let that go. You redid the contract, you know, with the previous contract that we had, is obviously we had to pay them, but if their product or whatever turned a profit, they would start paying us.
That's in there.
So that part is still in there. We're not paying them, but if they ever turn a profit, we'll still get that.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
If it wasn't, I might have blown against. All right. That's good.
Representative Corcoran, I've sat in this seat long enough to know that you were gonna ask me that question.
All right.
All right. Yeah, so then there's a bunch of bridge projects and FEMA projects in here that I won't bore you with. One of the ones I would point out is down in Chester. You're gonna notice that there's a Bridge 119 project, and then below it, there's another Bridge 119 project. So what happened here is one of those is a FEMA project. So we had a project designed for Bridge 119. And a couple of years ago, Mother Nature decided she was gonna come in faster than we wanted to. And she ruined the abutment on one end of that bridge. So why I point that out is half of this bridge project is gonna be paid for with FEMA funds. And the other half is, which is the normal project, is gonna be paid for through our regular project funds. So that's why you see the same bridge in here twice. And then the same thing on Bridge 124 is identical, is we have a FEMA project on one end and a standard funding resource for the other end. So it's not a duplicate. It really means what it says in here. There's two different funding sources on the same bridge. And what's nice about it is, you know, whenever you do a contract with a contractor, you know, mobilization is part of the contract. You got to get them there, right? So what's nice is we have FEMA helping us pay for mobilization. So effectively, Mother Nature kind of helps us in our state budget funding here for those two projects. The next project I want to talk about, and this is going to happen on two different rail corridors in here. So Coventry to Hartford, if you go down there, this is the Wacker Bridge Grant project. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to build a corridor project. So basically, you know, Coventry to Hartford, we own that line. And just like the build project that I just mentioned that we're building now, we want to do a very similar project from Hartford to Coventry, where we're going to evaluate sort of the weakest link. We want to get that entire corridor to 286,000 pounds, so full loaded cars, and to go 40 miles an hour max. So each bridge has to be designed to that. So we're doing a corridor project on that line, the Con River line, and then the Green Mountain line, which I'll talk about in a second, which is further down the list. But if you're wondering what that was, we're essentially building a project that we will hopefully have an opportunity to apply for a build or a Chrissy grant or something opportunities, because in rail, we heavily rely on discretionary grants. There's no like every year you're guaranteed this much money for your infrastructure and rail. That's not the way Federal Rail Administration works. We actually have to apply for our grants, our federal grants. So we have to build competitive projects, and that's what this corridor project is. We're putting together all the information to build a grant application that will be competitive when we actually do apply for it. So you got to kind of take your steps to get the federal money, and that's the steps we kind of have to take.
How much are you cringing on the federal side? The cutbacks on these federal grants?
Yeah, we don't know. You know, I wish I had a crystal ball, but
Yeah.
I think the thing that was very evident in the last IIJA funding period was that, hopefully the folks in Washington understood it, that all these competitive grants were all over prescribed, meaning they might have offered us, $2 billion, but the applicants put in for $6 billion. I mean, it was way oversubscribed. Like there was way more applications than the funding. So the need is there, and it's not just in Vermont, and these are all competitive. So that's why we take the time. We've been very successful. I don't know if you've seen the grants we've gotten in rail, but we've been very successful putting together competitive grants. So, we have a sort of a system that works for us, but anyway.
Some of this money is
So I don't know.
guaranteed is what I'm saying. Those are the out year worried, but everything in here is locked up, secured, that they can't claw back. Is I guess what I'm asking.
The only one that was in here that so everything in here except, okay, I should back up because your question is, to answer your question, so if you go way back up to Barry, Bridge 308.
Yep.
We need to apply for some mitigation funding from FEMA there. So to answer your question, in this budget, the only funding we haven't really already have in hand would be that one. So we're still looking for some FEMA mitigation funding for Bridge 308. And we have it in here, but you can see there's no state funds in there for it. It's essentially interdepartmental, which is FEMA funding, how we code FEMA funding.
Yeah.
We don't have that locked up right now. But other than that, to answer your question, everything in here is good to go.
Good.
Yes. That would be the only dollar that's not in hand. All right, so there's a couple of other corridor, and I would bring this to your attention because you're going to hear this for several years. The FRA put out something called a Corridor ID program, and that's on passenger services all through the country. All the states had to put in an application to be considered for, and we've put in both of our trains. So the Vermonter, which goes down to New England Central, we put in, that's called the Vermonter Corridor. And just for the record, in our application, we extended that corridor to Montreal. So if there's an opportunity and federal funding is legally allowed to be spent in Canada, which we're not sure it ever will, but we added it into our application just to cover our bases. And we are co-applicants with Connecticut and Mass, but Corridor ID requires us to do some work ahead of applying for grants. So in this budget, we are doing some Corridor ID work for scoping. And essentially there's a couple of steps is first identify what your corridor is. We're doing that now. Next, identify what do you need on that corridor just to keep it at a current level of service. And then the next level after that is going to be if you wanted to expand or you needed money for projects, what are those projects and all that. So there's kind of 3 steps. And the first step is 100% federal. Step 2 is going to be 90-10. So what's in here is 100% federal. The next step, actually step 2 is what's in here. Sorry. The first step is what we're working on now. Next year will be step 2. So we've got 90-10 next year. After that, it'll be 80-20. So step 3 will be 80-20 when we start getting the projects. But you're going to hear me talk about Corridor ID program over and over and over for the next several years. Because those will be monies I'll be applying for.
Hopefully we get there. That's Bennington Amtrak.
Yeah. Well, it could be. It could be because that is, we called that, and we didn't call it the Ethan Allen corridor.
Yeah.
Because we didn't want to, now the current route of the Ethan Allen corridor from Rutland over west to New York, that's part of that corridor ID, but it also goes down to Bennington, right? So we didn't call it the Ethan Allen just because we know it's different than the existing. So we call it the Green Mountain corridor. But we combined both of those current service and future service into that corridor. And it got accepted by the FRA. So
we're on to round 2.
You'll get your train someday.
Yeah, a few years from now.
we're
To 20 years.
You're gonna be able to ride on it.
Another 20.
But I know, I can't beg. Yeah, we're just getting to do so. Yeah.
We're in round 1 now, the fiscal year we're in now.
Okay.
The money that I'm asking for to start next July will be round 2.
So
So
we're confident.
what's in here is
Yeah,
round
yeah.
2. Yes.
So we've got a good feeling for round 2.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. The other thing that's in this budget is we have, 3 rail platforms, that we need to reconstruct. One of them is in Hartford. And we are literally bidding that project, this spring. So hopefully it'll go to construction, very soon, this next construction season. So, Hartford platform needs to be rebuilt and it needs to be built, couple changes so it's ADA compliant. So anyway, there's 3 of them in here. White River Junction, Hartford is one of them. Bellows Falls is another one, and then Rutland is the third one, and those are all in here.
And where?
So Rockingham would be the platform for Bellows Falls, and then Rutland would be the platform for Rutland.
Yeah, thanks. So I'm talking specifically about the crossing on West Street in Rutland.
That's in here.
Yes, it is. Yes. And
That last year.
no, that's okay. That's okay. I had an office for 15 years right beyond. And I think that has been rebuilt several times. Or what has, I mean, it seems like there's been work on it more than, so I'm just curious if it's, how do you solve the problem of reconstruction?
Well, I think everything we own is going to constantly be in some sort of maintenance or reconstruction. So the West Street crossing, we actually had that in our budget about 2 to 3 years ago. And then in order for us to do projects in towns, we have to come to an agreement with the town to say, we're going to do our rail piece. We're going to put some signs in your right of way. We're going to have, we may need to adjust your sidewalk, or we may need to add this or that. We, VTrans and the city of Rutland, couldn't quite come to terms on that agreement. Long story short, we took us a couple of years to get there. Yeah, we're there. So we do have an agreement, and so we kind of paused that project, but while we paused it, we had to go do some cosmetic repairs just to make it rideable, right? So my point is, we've been there and done some Band-Aids. Now this is the big project. So yes, you have seen some activity.
Yes.
I just, for that West Street crossing, so when I leave here Friday, I get stuck sometimes with the train crossing, which is fine, but it's a longer train. And it kind of goes across very slowly and stops. And then backs up slowly again. And does that like 2 or 3 times and then stops in the middle. What's going on?
No, the question is, how does they know it's you?
Down Crescent Street, you're like, okay.
So what's going on there is that crossing is in the immediate vicinity of a rail yard where they bring cars in. And so I'll make something up. If you have a 50-car train and car number 25, 37, and whatever need to be taken out of that train and put into another train, that's what's happening. So they basically pull up, unhitch whatever's there, pull forward, push that other car that's supposedly going on another train into a different siding, pull up ahead, do the same thing until they've got a consist of a train that's headed in the right direction.
Well,
And I'm talking with my hands. I'm sorry.
I sat there for like 10 minutes. I'm like, okay, I'm done.
They're like, here comes Patty. All right, pull that.
What's the first 2 cars? They must know what's going on. I'm following
It's
that.
actually fairly quick, I would say.
Yeah, and it happens a lot. Yeah.
I said every day at work, our shop backs up to the rail yard. So we get it pretty regular every day. I can get stuff back and forth.
Yeah, so anyway, so West Street and Forest Street are 2 crossings that were in that same boat where we had them at one point. So anyway, they're now going to go to construction in this project.
My concern was that why couldn't we keep it? But I understand. Thank you.
Yeah. We got there, just, took us a little longer.
See what happened? We lost one Rutland County guy and another Rutland County guy.
It's just a baton.
All right, so a couple other things in the budget here. is the I was talking about the build project earlier where I showed you all the stuff we did in FY 26 in this budget year, our very final of those 29, our last one's there. So this is our last build money will show up in this FY 26 budget. It's the Rutland City Bridge 99.5. That's our last bridge. It's a bridge that's actually in the rail yard. So it's a complicated bridge. It's not a big bridge, but it's heavy traffic. There's just always a train moving across it. So it's difficult for us to build.
Dan, is that a good spot where you're talking about your last of those bridges being done? And you look at your projections overall, it's obviously a pretty substantial drop in rail plan investments over the next few years. Is that because we're coming off this big?
Yes.
Huge project, we don't have another big hitting right immediately on the horizon, except the corridors you're prepping us for future.
Yes, so money doesn't show up in my budget until I get the grant, right? So if I apply, like last year, I applied for a Chrissy grant. I applied for a Chrissy grant of $60 million. I didn't get it, okay? So obviously, I'm not gonna put it in this budget until I get to Representative Corcoran's point. You don't put it in there unless it's in your hand, right? So that's why the rail budget might show like this. I might get, so some of these projects that I'm building, like the corridor projects that I want to apply for a grant for, I won't know that until the next round of grants come out and I apply and I get it. So then, we come in and we say, hey, we got a grant, budget adjustment. We talk about how, if it has a match or not and all that. But I don't put it in here until we have the money in hand.
So those could substantially change based on what you're applying for.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So we are, we've talked about that last grant and we've talked to the FRA about, what was missing in the grant, why ours wasn't selected. And the good news was they were like, well, you had a good grant. We just didn't have enough money. It was one of those things. So the next time the grant comes around, applications come around, we'll have to make a decision whether we're going to apply for that grant or not.
So I can't read into it that we're less invested in rail, but I also can't read into it that everything's fixed. So,
Everything is not fixed. I can tell you that. The need is there. I can tell you that. All right, I'm going to try to keep us on schedule here and allow for some questions at the end. So to talk about grants, one of the things that the federal government requires, the FRA requires is an up-to-date statewide rail plan. And we have to do this every 5 years. So there's money in the FY 26 budget to redo our statewide rail plan. We are working on that right now, but that plan will go into 26, so into next July. So anyhow, that's what this money is. It's in progress, but we are required to do this. And the good news is we are doing it. So this meets a federal requirement. Do you have a current statewide rail plan?
please, Representative Burke.
Yeah, Dan, so when you said it'll go into 26, give me, like, will it not be done until 2026? It'll go in the 26 budget? What is it?
It should be done this coming summer,
Okay,
but so there's money that's going to need to be spent in fiscal year 26, which starts in July. So that's what this is. I'm asking for money to finish the rail plan in the next fiscal
it'll be
year.
done.
It should be done this summer, fall. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Representative Couch?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So in the next rail plan, I mean, is it, Amtrak to Bennington, or are there like a couple, 3 or 4 big things that get into Montreal? Are those the things that are in the rail track? Or is it more like, here's another bridge we need to upgrade?
So I don't want to get ahead of the rail plan because I want the actual consultant to, I don't want to be the one to say, this is what we want in the rail plan. I want the plan itself to drive the plan, meaning there's a bunch of public input, there's a bunch of, businesses, there's a bunch of railroads, they all give their input, which creates what is the need for the rail infrastructure in the state of Vermont, which creates the rail plan. So all of that is happening right now. What I would say is Montreal is, has been our Burlington was our number one. Burlington got done. So now Montreal is our next number one. That appears to still be gaining a ton of traction. We'll see how it What's that?
Well, where's the other D?
No, Bennington is in there. Bennington is definitely being looked at, for sure. So the Bennington piece, the question there is, do you take the existing, service and not go to New York, just go straight down and then go to New York? Or do you add a second service, meaning we keep on the same route and then we add a second frequency? So those are things that I can tell you are being looked at. I don't know how it's going to come out in the plan. Those are, I can tell you that's come up in public comment, so far. So it's on board. Yeah. Yeah.
So this reminds me, who is our house designee on the rail council? Do we have one? Wasn't it Sarah?
It was, that was something that we,
And I forget whether it's something speaker appoints or,
It hasn't come up on the rail, but I was asked about the air and
no, but we should have somebody on the rail council. I'm on the public transit council.
I jumped on the air.
Yeah, some of them are different. Some of them with the governor and some of them with the speaker.
Yeah. I know that
The rail.
the public transit was the speaker.
Yeah.
I was appointed a long time ago, but I think if somebody is interested, we should definitely have somebody.
I
on there.
suspect somebody in the corner is quickly typing away.
yeah, let us know. Well, obviously, I'll let the governor's office know. Appointed by the governor, so they usually let us know. All right, I think I'm almost done. A couple more things. So in this budget, there's a couple of large federal grants that we put in a letter of support for railroads that we don't own. They are, if you look at this budget, you're going to say, wow, there's a lot of, from last year, your, total rail budget is up quite a bit. Well, those are actually monies that are going to private railroads that they applied for federal grants for. There's no state money. We don't run the projects. However, as the state agency, we are the oversight of those federal funds. So they're in our rail budget. We do have a project manager that sort of oversees the project. But we aren't designing it. We're not, managing the construction. We're just our oversight. So the two I'm talking about are, there's a tri-state regional grant. And that is for the St. Lawrence and Atlantic, which comes in Norton, goes through Island Pond and goes to New Hampshire, then over to Maine. So it's a tri-state grant because there's infrastructure in this grant for Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. Vermont's not participating with any funds, but we're managing it. New Hampshire's not managing it, but they're adding funds. Maine's not managing it, but they're adding funds. And the remainder is being paid, the remainder of the match is being paid for by the railroad itself.
Sounds like a good deal.
Yeah, yeah. And then the very last one on the page, which is the Windsor to St. Albans, identical situation. But it's all in Vermont essentially. And it's New England Central is paying for the match on that. So if you look at this budget, we've got a total of 4.9 million in there, 0 state dollars. The railroad itself is paying, 1.2 and the rest is federal, 3.7 is federal. So, we're managing the funds, but we're not actually designing or building. So I wanted to point that out when we look at the budget and you were saying, well, last year you were 48 million, this year, you're talking 61 million. Well, there's $15 million in this budget out of those two grants that are going directly to the railroad. So that's what that is. So anyway, this project, this budget, it's 22 bridge projects, 3 platform projects, and 19 FEMA projects. 19 FEMA projects that add up to 6.7 million. So if Mother Nature is nice to us next year, I'd like to say we can, not have to do as many FEMA projects. Anyway, any questions about, I said a lot, I kept talking.
I think we had a lot of questions as we went through. I think people seem to be pretty satisfied with what they got to hear. Representative Lounge.
I just want to confirm that if we have a FEMA event and let's say it's a bridge that had been fine, was not on the list to upgrade, we have a FEMA event, knocks it out or something happens. Those do get upgraded so that it's not just not replaced, is it?
Yeah, so the FEMA project, let's give you a great example here. So the FEMA projects that are in this budget, they actually aren't from this past 2024 storm. They're actually from the 23 storm because we fixed it, we got the railroad open. Now we're looking at, just like what you said, is that structure now what it should be? Can we mitigate, can we use FEMA mitigation funds to improve it so it doesn't wash out again? So there's sort of the pre-disaster standard, meaning the structure, FEMA will fund it at pre-disaster standard. And then they'll look at, well, if we just did a little more, it won't wash out again. So some of the monies that you see in here are, we're getting into that mitigation part of it, where we're actually, if that culvert, say, was, you know, a 4-foot round culvert, make it a 10-foot or 8-foot or whatever it's supposed to be with the new hydraulic. So the answer is yes, we are looking at that when we talk about FEMA, because FEMA doesn't want to spend money on the same site over and over. They don't.
Yeah, but it can be difficult to get those upgrades in place at the same time. So I'm glad, at least this has been my experience at the municipal level. So I'm glad that in the real world, maybe it's a little bit more straightforward.
So our initial reaction is get the railroad open, right? So we take our best guess, we do a very quick hydraulic analysis, we put in what we think should be there, and then we, we move forward, get the railroad open. Then we step back, like, we're talking about a year now later than that storm, and we're doing design work on, okay, let's go all the way upstream, let's look a little further, let's make sure that structure is where it should be. But yeah, we do that.
Dan, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. We're adjourned for this afternoon.